She looked into that little girl's eyes and felt nothing. No mercy, no love, just pure hatred. And when she opened that car door and pushed her out onto that empty road, she had no idea that one person was watching. One person who would destroy everything she'd built. This is the story of how cruelty came back to haunt the cruelest woman in Lagos. If you believe that karma is real, stay with me until the end of this story. And if this touches your heart, please like, share, and subscribe, because stories like Amara's need to be heard. Let's begin. The morning sun cast golden rays across the Adeyemi mansion in Ikoyi, one of Lagos's most prestigious neighborhoods. The compound was a testament to wealth, marble floors that gleamed like mirrors, crystal chandeliers imported from Italy, and a fleet of luxury cars parked in the driveway like soldiers at attention. Inside the master bedroom, Mrs. Vivian Adeyemi stood before her full-length mirror, adjusting a stunning royal blue Aso oak that hugged her curves perfectly. At 38, she was still the kind of woman who turned heads wherever she went. Her skin was flawless, her makeup expertly applied, her jewelry carefully chosen to dazzle but not overwhelm. She looked perfect, because perfection was all that mattered to Vivian. "Madam, the car is ready," her personal driver called from downstairs. "I'll be down in 5 minutes," she replied, her voice as smooth as silk. But her reflection in the mirror told a different story. Behind those carefully made-up eyes was a woman who carried a secret burden, a constant irritation that no amount of wealth or beauty could erase. Amara, her husband's daughter. That small, quiet 10-year-old girl who had the audacity to exist. Vivian had married Chief Adeyemi 3 years ago, fully aware that he was a widower with a young daughter. At the time, she'd convinced herself it wouldn't matter. After all, children were easy to manage, weren't they? A few gifts here, some kind words there, and they'd fall in line. But Amara was different. The child didn't fall in line. She didn't crave Vivian's approval. She didn't try to win her over with cute smiles or desperate attempts at affection. Instead, Amara simply existed, quietly, peacefully, as if Vivian's presence in her life meant nothing at all. And that drove Vivian absolutely mad. Because every time Chief Adeyemi looked at his daughter, Vivian saw something she couldn't compete with: genuine love. The kind of love that didn't need designer clothes or expensive dinners. The kind of love that had been built between a father and daughter through years of bedtime stories, scraped knees, and whispered secrets. Vivian wasn't his first love. Amara's mother was. And even though that woman had been dead for 4 years, her presence still lingered in the house like a ghost Vivian couldn't exorcise. It was in the way Chief Adeyemi's eyes softened when he braided Amara's hair. It was in the old photographs he kept in his study. It was in the way he'd sometimes call Amara, "my little sunshine," the same nickname he'd apparently given his late wife. Vivian hated it all. She descended the grand staircase with practiced grace, her high heels clicking against the marble. In the living room, Chief Adeyemi sat reading the morning newspaper, his reading glasses perched on his nose. "You look stunning, my dear," he said without looking up. "Thank you, darling," Vivian replied, kissing his cheek. "Is Amara ready?" "She should be, Amara," he called out. "Your stepmother is waiting." Moments later, Amara appeared from the hallway, dressed in a simple yellow sundress with white sandals. Her hair was neatly cornrowed, and she carried a small backpack. The girl was beautiful, there was no denying that. She had her late mother's warm brown eyes and her father's strong features. But to Vivian, that beauty was just another reminder of what she could never be, the first Mrs. Adeyemi. "Good morning, Ma," Amara said softly, barely making eye contact. "Morning," Vivian replied curtly. "We're already late, let's go." The charity event they were attending was one of the biggest social gatherings of the year, a fundraiser for orphaned children, hosted by the wives of Lagos's elite businessmen. It was the kind of event where appearances mattered more than actual charity, where women competed to see who could wear the most expensive jewelry and whose husband could write the biggest check. Vivian lived for these events. They climbed into the back of the Mercedes S-Class, with Amara sitting quietly beside her stepmother. The driver started the engine and pulled out of the compound, navigating through Lagos's chaotic traffic with practiced ease. For the first 20 minutes, nobody spoke. Vivian scrolled through her phone, checking her social media pages where she'd carefully curated an image of herself as a loving wife, successful businesswoman, and benevolent philanthropist. Her followers adored her. They commented with heart emojis and praying hands, calling her woman goals and Lagos queen. If only they knew the truth. Auntie Vivian, Amara's small voice broke the silence. Vivian didn't look up from her phone. What? Can I get something to drink? I'm thirsty. With an exaggerated sigh, Vivian reached into the small cooler beside her and pulled out a box of orange juice. She handed it to Amara without a word, then returned to her phone. The child carefully inserted the straw and began to sip. Everything was fine, until the driver swerved suddenly to avoid a pothole. It happened in slow motion. The juice box slipped from Amara's small hands, and bright orange liquid splashed across Vivian's lap, soaking into the expensive royal blue fabric. The car went deadly silent. Vivian looked down at her dress, her designer, custom-made, one-of-a-kind dress that had cost more than most Nigerians earned in 3 months. Ruined. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, Amara gasped, her eyes wide with terror. She grabbed tissues from her backpack and tried frantically to dab at the stain. The car moved and I didn't mean. Get your hands off me, Vivian screamed, slapping the child's hands away. The driver glanced nervously in the rearview mirror. Madam, should I? Stop the car, Vivian hissed. Madam. I said stop the car. The driver immediately pulled over to the side of the road. They were on a relatively quiet stretch of highway, with bushes on one side and scattered buildings on the other. Vivian's chest heaved with rage. Years of resentment, jealousy, and frustration boiled over in that single moment. This wasn't about a stained dress anymore. This was about every time Chief Adeyemi had chosen Amara over her, every time she'd felt like a stranger in her own home, every time she'd been reminded that she would never be the woman her husband truly loved. And this little girl, this quiet, innocent child, represented all of it. Vivian stepped out of the car. She walked around to the back door, and she opened it. Get out, she said coldly. Amara's eyes filled with tears. Please, Auntie Vivian, I said I'm sorry. Get out. The child slowly climbed out of the car, her small body trembling. And then Vivian did something she would regret for the rest of her life. She slammed the door shut, got back in the front passenger seat, and told the driver, drive. But madam, the child. I said drive. As the Mercedes pulled away, Vivian didn't look back. She didn't see Amara standing alone on that roadside, confusion and fear written across her face. She didn't see the small figure growing smaller in the distance. What Vivian also didn't see was the elderly woman selling roasted corn under a faded umbrella about 50 meters away. A woman who had watched the entire scene unfold. A woman who was already reaching for her phone. Because some witnesses aren't there by accident. Some witnesses are there by design. And Vivian Adeyemi had just made the biggest mistake of her perfect life. What happens next will leave you speechless. Stay with me. Amara stood frozen on the roadside, watching the silver Mercedes disappear into the distance. The hot Lagos sun beat down on her small frame, and dust from passing vehicles settled on her yellow dress, the same dress she'd been so excited to wear that morning. She didn't understand. What had she done that was so terrible? It was an accident, just an accident. Auntie Vivian, she called out, her voice cracking. Auntie Vivian, please come back. But the car was gone. Tears streamed down her cheeks as the reality of her situation began to sink in. She was alone. She didn't know exactly where she was. Her father was at home, probably thinking she was safely on her way to the charity event. Cars zoomed past her, danfos packed with passengers, Okadas weaving dangerously through traffic, fancy SUVs with tinted windows. Nobody stopped. Nobody even slowed down. In Lagos, a child standing by the roadside was just another part of the chaotic landscape that people had learned to ignore. Amara's legs felt weak. She sank down onto a concrete barrier, hugging her small backpack to her chest. Inside were her coloring books, the ones she'd brought to keep herself busy during the boring adult event. Now they seemed like relics from another lifetime, a lifetime where she still had someone to take her home. "Mama," she whispered to the sky, thinking of the mother she barely remembered. "Mama, I'm scared." The minutes crawled by like hours. The sun climbed higher, making the air shimmer with heat. Amara's throat was dry, ironically, because she'd spilled her juice. Her stomach began to rumble. She'd been so nervous about the event that morning that she'd barely eaten breakfast. Just when she thought things couldn't get worse, dark clouds began gathering on the horizon. Lagos's afternoon rain was coming. That's when she heard the voice. Small Pickin, what are you doing here alone?" Amara looked up to see an elderly woman approaching her. She wore a faded wrapper and blouse, her hair covered with a traditional headscarf. Her hands were rough and weathered, the hands of someone who'd worked hard all her life. Behind her, about 50 meters away, was a small roadside stand with a charcoal grill where corn was being roasted. The woman's face was kind, her eyes filled with genuine concern. "Auntie," Amara's voice came out as barely a whisper. The woman sat down beside her on the barrier, moving with the careful slowness of someone whose joints had seen many rainy seasons. Up close, Amara could see that despite her worn clothing, there was something dignified about her, something almost regal. "What's your name, my child?" Amara Adeyemi." The woman's eyes flickered with something, recognition, surprise, but her voice remained gentle. "Adeyemi, and how did you end up here by yourself?" Through tears and hiccups, Amara told her everything. About her stepmother, about the spilled juice, about being pushed out of the car and abandoned. The woman listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally, her face growing more serious with each word. "This woman who left you here," she said carefully, "what does she look like?" Amara described Vivian, her beautiful face, her expensive clothes, her cold eyes. "And your father, Chief Adeyemi, he knows you're here." "No, Ma. He thinks I'm going to the charity event with Auntie Vivian." The woman stood up slowly, brushing dust from her wrapper. "Come with me, Amara. Let's get you some water and food first, then we'll make a phone call." "To the police?" Amara asked hopefully. The woman smiled, a strange, knowing smile. "No, my dear, to someone much more important than the police." She led Amara to her small stand where a young girl, probably around 17, was tending to the roasting corn. The elderly woman whispered something to the girl, who immediately disappeared into a small shack behind the stand. Sit, the woman gestured to a wooden stool. She handed Amara a bottle of cold water and a piece of roasted corn. "Eat slowly, your stomach needs to settle." As Amara ate, the woman pulled out a mobile phone, not the cheap kind that most roadside vendors used, but an expensive smartphone, the latest model. She stepped a few meters away and made a call. Amara couldn't hear everything, but she caught fragments. "Yes, it finally happened, just as you suspected. I have her here with me. No, she's safe. We have everything we need. Tonight, yes, I'll arrange it." When the woman returned, her expression had changed. There was a steel in her eyes now, a determination that seemed almost out of place for a corn seller. "Amara," she said, kneeling down so they were eye level, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen carefully." The child nodded, corn forgotten in her hands. "My name is Mrs. Okonkwo, but you can call me Aunt Ngozi." She paused, watching Amara's face carefully. "I knew your mother, your real mother, Kioma." Amara's eyes went wide. "You knew my mama?" "Yes, we were very close. In fact," Aunt Ngozi's voice softened with emotion, "I am your mother's older sister, your aunt, your blood." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. But why are you selling corn? Why didn't you come to see me? Why?" "Because, my dear child, I've been watching, waiting." Aunt Ngozi's voice turned hard. Your stepmother is not a good woman. For months now, I've suspected she was treating you badly. I've heard things from people who work in your house. I've seen how she looks at you when you're in public. But I needed proof. Real proof. The kind that even a powerful man like your father couldn't ignore. I don't understand. You don't need to understand everything right now. But know this, I am not really a corn seller. This, she gestured at the humble stand, is just my way of staying close, of watching, of waiting for the day when your stepmother would finally reveal her true nature. She held up her phone, and now, thanks to you, we have proof. What proof? Aunt Ngozi smiled. There was a car behind you when your stepmother pushed you out, a car with a dash cam. The driver is a friend of mine. I asked him to follow you today, just in case. He recorded everything, every single second of what that woman did to you. Amara's mouth fell open. But that's not all, Aunt Ngozi continued, her voice taking on a dangerous edge. For the past 6 months, I've been investigating your stepmother's so-called charity work. And what I've found, she shook her head. Let's just say that Mrs. Vivian Adeyemi has been a very naughty woman with other people's money. Are you going to tell Papa? Oh, my sweet child, I'm going to do much more than that. Aunt Ngozi stood up, suddenly looking taller, more powerful than any corn seller had a right to be. But first, we wait. We let your stepmother go to that charity event. We let her smile and take pictures and pretend to be a good woman. We let her think she got away with it. And then, tomorrow morning, we destroy her world. The young girl emerged from the shack carrying a bag. Aunt Ngozi took it and pulled out a change of clothes, a nice dress, clean and pressed. Come, let's get you cleaned up. You'll spend the night with me at my real house. Not here, don't worry. It's in Banana Island. Banana Island, one of the most expensive neighborhoods in all of Nigeria. Amara's head was spinning. But if you live in Banana Island, why do you sell corn? Aunt Ngozi laughed, a rich, full sound. Because, my dear, sometimes the best way to see the truth is to become invisible. And who pays attention to an old woman selling corn by the roadside? She touched Amara's cheek gently. Your mother was my baby sister. When she died, I promised her I would always protect you. And I have been, every single day, even when you didn't know it. Fresh tears rolled down Amara's cheeks, but these were different. These weren't tears of fear or abandonment. These were tears of relief. Now, Aunt Ngozi said, her voice turning businesslike, let's get you comfortable. Tomorrow is going to be a very long day for everyone involved. As they walked toward a sleek black car parked discreetly behind the shack, Amara looked back at the roadside where she'd been abandoned just an hour ago. She'd thought it was the worst day of her life. She had no idea it was actually the beginning of justice. Meanwhile, across town at the Oriental Hotel, Victoria Island, the charity gala was in full swing. Crystal chandeliers cast glittering light across the ballroom where Lagos's elite had gathered. Women in expensive asoebi competed for attention, their gold jewelry catching the light with every movement. Men in agbada and designer suits discussed business deals between sips of champagne. And in the center of it all, holding court like a queen, was Mrs. Vivian Adeyemi. She'd changed her dress. The moment she'd arrived at the venue, she'd gone straight to the restroom with the emergency outfit she always kept in the car, a stunning emerald green gown that actually looked better than the ruined blue one. She'd reapplied her makeup, fixed her hair, and emerged looking absolutely flawless. No one would ever know about the incident on the road. Vivian, darling, Mrs. Bankel, the event organizer, swept over in a cloud of expensive perfume. You look absolutely radiant. Thank you, dear, Vivian replied, her smile perfect. You've outdone yourself with this event, simply magnificent. Where's your stepdaughter? I thought she was coming with you. Vivian's smile didn't waver for even a second. Oh, you know children. At the last minute, she insisted on going to her friend's birthday party instead. I couldn't say no, she'd been looking forward to it all week. The lie came so smoothly, so naturally, that even Vivian herself almost believed it. Such a kind stepmother, Mrs. Bankel gushed. Not every woman would be so understanding with her husband's child from another marriage. Well, Amara is family, Vivian said, placing her hand over her heart in a gesture of false sincerity. And family is everything. The irony of those words didn't seem to register with anyone. For the next 3 hours, Vivian worked the room like the professional she was. She posed for photographs with other society women. She gave a touching speech about the importance of helping orphaned children, the very children who had more love in their lives than the girl she'd abandoned on a roadside. She even managed to shed a few artful tears when talking about the plight of children without mothers. The audience ate it up. Donations poured in. Checks were written. Vivian's reputation as a philanthropic queen was further cemented. By 8 o'clock, she was exhausted but triumphant. She slipped away from the crowd and found a quiet corner to check her phone. 15 missed calls from Chief Adeyemi. Her heart skipped a beat, but she forced herself to remain calm. She called him back. "Darling, I'm so sorry, the event has been absolutely crazy." "Where is Amara?" His voice was tight, controlled. The voice he used when he was trying very hard not to explode. "What do you mean? She's at her friend Zara's house for a birthday party, remember?" "I just called Zara's mother. There's no birthday party. Amara isn't there." Vivian's mind raced. Well, perhaps she meant a different friend. You know how children are, they have so many friends. "Vivian," Chief Adeyemi's voice dropped to a dangerous level. "Where is my daughter?" I don't know. She told me she wanted to go to a friend's house, so I dropped her off." "You dropped a 10-year-old child off somewhere without knowing exactly where, without confirming with me." She seemed so sure, I thought. "You thought what exactly?" His voice was rising now. "That it was fine to leave my daughter somewhere without verifying where she was going. What kind of mother?" He stopped himself, but they both knew what he'd been about to say. "What kind of mother are you?" The answer, of course, was that she wasn't Amara's mother. Not really. Not in any way that mattered. "I'm coming home," Chief Adeyemi said coldly. "And you need to tell me exactly what happened today, every single detail." The line went dead. Vivian stood there, her hand trembling slightly as she lowered the phone. This was fine. Everything was fine. She just needed to stick to her story. Amara would turn up eventually, probably at another relative's house or wandering around the neighborhood. The child would be too scared to tell the truth about what had really happened. And even if she did tell, who would believe her over Vivian's word? Chief Adeyemi was angry now, but he'd calmed down. He always did. Vivian took a deep breath, reapplied her lipstick, and went back into the ballroom to say her goodbyes. She had no idea that at that very moment, in a luxury apartment in Banana Island, her entire world was being systematically dismantled. Aunt Ngozie's real house was nothing like her roadside corn stand. The penthouse apartment had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Lagos Lagoon. The furniture was elegant and expensive. Original artwork hung on the walls. This was the home of a woman with serious wealth and serious connections. Amara sat on a plush sofa, freshly bathed and dressed in comfortable pajamas, eating jollof rice that actually tasted like home. Like the way her mother used to make it, though she barely remembered those days. Aunt Ngozi sat across from her, laptop open, phone constantly buzzing with messages. "Eat up, dear. You need your strength for tomorrow." "What's happening tomorrow?" "Tomorrow," Aunt Ngozi said, her eyes glinting with something that might have been satisfaction. "We have a family meeting." "Will Papa be there?" "Oh yes, your father will definitely be there." She paused. "And so will your stepmother, though I suspect she won't be nearly as eager to attend once she finds out what we have to show her." Aunt Ngozi turned her laptop around so Amara could see the screen. It showed a video, crystal-clear footage from a dashcam. There was Vivian's Mercedes pulling over to the side of the road. There was the back door opening. There was Amara being pushed out. And there, most damningly, was Vivian's face as she got back in the car, cold and emotionless, before driving away. "This," Aunt Ngozi said, "is what we call evidence." She clicked to another folder. spreadsheets, bank statements, email printouts. And this, she continued, is what we call fraud. Amara didn't understand all the numbers and documents, but she understood enough. Her stepmother had been stealing money, lots of money, money that was supposed to help people. For 6 months, I've been building this case, Aunt Ngozi explained. I hired private investigators. I had accountants review every charity transaction your stepmother has touched. I've interviewed people who work in your house, people who have seen how she treats you when your father isn't watching. Why didn't you just tell Papa? Because, my sweet child, men like your father, good men, powerful men, they don't always want to believe the worst about the women they love. They need proof, undeniable proof. She closed the laptop, and now we have it. Her phone rang. She looked at the screen and smiled. Right on time, she answered. Chief Adeyemi, good evening. Yes, I know you're looking for her, because she's with me. My name is Ngozi Okonkwo. I was your late wife's sister. Yes, that Ngozi. Amara is perfectly safe. No, I think you need to hear this story in person. Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock, my lawyer will send you the address. Bring your wife. Yes, both of you need to be there. Trust me, Chief. After tomorrow, you'll understand everything. She hung up and looked at Amara. Get some rest, little one. Tomorrow the truth comes out, all of it. Vivian didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed beside her husband, who had turned his back to her, a silent statement of his anger and disappointment. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Amara's face in the rearview mirror, growing smaller and smaller. What had she been thinking? No, she knew exactly what she'd been thinking. She'd been thinking about all those years of feeling second best. All those moments when Chief Adeyemi's eyes softened for his daughter in a way they never quite did for her. All those times she'd walked into a room and felt like an intruder in her own home. But now, lying in the dark, reality was setting in. She'd abandoned a child, a 10-year-old child, on a roadside. What kind of person does that? The phone call from that Ngozi woman had shaken Chief Adeyemi badly. He'd asked Vivian 100 questions. Do you know this woman? Did you really drop Amara somewhere? What exactly happened today? And Vivian had stuck to her story, her voice growing more desperate with each repetition. I dropped her at a friend's house. I don't know how she ended up with this stranger. Maybe she wandered off. Maybe she got confused. But even she could hear how hollow it sounded. At 5 a.m., unable to bear the silence anymore, Vivian got up and went to her walk-in closet. She pulled out outfit after outfit, trying to decide what to wear to this mysterious meeting. What does one wear to face accusations? Designer armor, she decided. If she looked powerful, maybe she could still control the narrative. She chose a cream Chanel suit with her most expensive jewelry, wore paint and battle dress. By 9:30, they were in the car. Chief Adeyemi drove in grim silence. He'd barely spoken to her all morning except to say, Whatever happened yesterday, Vivian, you will tell the truth today. Do you understand me? She'd nodded, her throat too tight to speak. The address led them to one of Banana Island's most exclusive buildings. Chief Adeyemi's eyebrows rose slightly as they pulled up to the gate. Whoever this woman is, he muttered, she's not some random stranger off the street. They were escorted to a penthouse on the 20th floor. The door was opened by a young woman in professional attire who introduced herself as Mrs. Okonkwo's assistant. The apartment was stunning and familiar. Chief Adeyemi stopped in the entryway, his eyes scanning the artwork on the walls. I know this place, he said slowly. Kiyomer and I, we visited here once years ago. This was her sister's home, but I thought, he turned to the assistant, I thought Ngozi lived abroad. Mrs. Okonkwo returned to Nigeria 8 months ago, the assistant replied smoothly. Right around the time of your remarriage. The implication hung in the air like smoke. They were led into a spacious living room where several people were already waiting. Aunt Ngozi sat in a high-backed chair like a judge on a bench. Beside her was a middle-aged man in an expensive suit, clearly a lawyer. And on the sofa, looking small but calm, was Amara. Papa, the child jumped up and ran to her father. Chief Adeyemi dropped to his knees and wrapped his daughter in his arms, his eyes squeezed shut. Thank Thank God you're safe." When he pulled back, his hands were shaking as he checked her over. "Are you hurt? Did anyone hurt you?" "I'm fine, Papa. Aunt Ngozi took care of me." Chief Adeyemi stood slowly, his eyes moving to the elderly woman who was watching him with an unreadable expression. "Ngozi," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I didn't know you were back in the country. Kioma always spoke so highly of you, if I'd known." "You would have done what, Chief Adeyemi?" Aunt Ngozi's voice was cool but not unkind. "Invited me to the wedding, asked me to bless your new marriage to a woman you barely knew." She gestured to the empty chairs. "Please sit, we have much to discuss." Vivian remained standing near the door, her survival instinct screaming at her to run. But there was nowhere to go. "Mrs. Adeyemi," Aunt Ngozi said, turning her sharp gaze on Vivian. "You too, sit." It wasn't a request. Once everyone was seated, the lawyer opened a sleek laptop and turned it to face the room. "Chief Adeyemi," Aunt Ngozi began, "I want to start by saying that I don't blame you for what has happened. You are a good father who is trying to rebuild his life after tragedy, but you married a woman you didn't truly know, and that woman has been causing harm to your daughter, my niece, for quite some time." "That's not true," Vivian burst out. "I've been nothing but kind to that child." "Really?" Aunt Ngozi's voice was ice. "Shall we watch the video?" The lawyer pressed play. The dashcam footage filled the screen. Crystal clear, undeniable, the Mercedes pulling over, the door opening, Amara being pushed out, the small figure standing alone on the roadside as the car drove away. The timestamp showed yesterday's date and time. Chief Adeyemi's face went through several emotions in rapid succession: confusion, disbelief, horror, and finally, rage. Pure volcanic rage. "You," he whispered, turning to Vivian, "you put my daughter out of the car on a highway alone." "She spilled juice on my dress." Vivian's voice was shrill now, desperate. "She ruined a very expensive—" "She's a child," Chief Adeyemi roared, standing up so fast his chair fell backward. "She's a 10-year-old child and you left her on the side of the road like garbage." "Chief," the lawyer interjected calmly, "please sit down, there's more." "More? How could there be more?" The lawyer pulled up a series of documents on the screen. Bank statements, transfer records, email chains. "For the past 3 years," he explained in a clinical tone, "Mrs. Vivian Adeyemi has been the public face of the Hope for Tomorrow charity organization, which manages donations for orphaned children across Lagos State. In that time, the charity has received approximately 847 million naira in donations." Chief Adeyemi leaned forward. "Yes, I know. I've personally contributed to that fund." "Indeed you have, sir. 50 million naira over the past 2 years. The lawyer clicked to another screen. "The problem is that only about 40% of the total donations actually went to the intended beneficiaries. The rest was redirected." "Redirected where?" The lawyer pulled up bank account information. "To various personal accounts, offshore holdings, real estate purchases made in shell company names." He looked directly at Vivian. "Mrs. Adeyemi has been systematically embezzling from the charity for over 2 years. We estimate she's stolen approximately 340 million naira." The room went silent. 340 million naira. Money meant for orphans, for children who had nothing. Stolen by a woman who had everything. "You're lying," Vivian whispered, but there was no conviction in her voice. "These documents are fake. You've made this up too." "I have signed statements from 3 of your charity's board members," Aunt Ngozi interrupted, pulling out a folder. "People you thought were loyal to you. People who became very talkative when faced with the choice between protecting you or protecting themselves from prosecution." She spread the documents across the coffee table, like playing cards. "I have testimony from your household staff about how you treat Amara when her father isn't home, the names you call her, the way you isolate her, the food you deny her when you're angry." More papers. "I have receipts for jewelry and handbags purchased with charity funds. I have email evidence of you instructing your accountant to reclassify certain expenses. I have everything, Mrs. Adeyemi. Everything. Vivian felt the walls closing in. Her perfect life, her perfect image, crumbling like a sandcastle in the tide. Chief Adeyemi, Aunt Ngozi said, her voice softening slightly. I know this is painful, but you needed to see the truth. The woman you married is not who she pretended to be, and your daughter has been suffering in silence, too afraid to tell you, thinking she somehow deserved this treatment. Chief Adeyemi's eyes moved to Amara, who sat quietly on the sofa, her hands folded in her lap. Baby, he said hoarsely, why didn't you tell me? Amara's voice was small. I thought you loved her more than me. I thought if I complained, you'd be angry with me. The words broke something in Chief Adeyemi. He crossed the room and pulled his daughter into his arms again, and this time, he didn't try to hide his tears. Never, he whispered into her hair. Never, never, never. You are my heart, Amara. You are my sunshine. Nothing and no one comes before you. Vivian watched this scene from her chair, and for the first time she felt something close to remorse. Not for the money, though that was bad enough, but for the look on that little girl's face. The relief. The pure, desperate relief of finally being believed. Had she really been that cruel? Yes. Yes, she had. What happens now? Chief Adeyemi asked, still holding Amara. The lawyer closed his laptop. That depends on several factors. The evidence we have is more than sufficient for criminal prosecution. Mrs. Adeyemi could face significant prison time for embezzlement and fraud. However, he glanced at Aunt Ngozi. However, Aunt Ngozi continued, our primary concern is Amara's welfare, not revenge. Chief Adeyemi, I am prepared to offer you a solution. A way to resolve this that protects your daughter and allows your family to move forward. I'm listening. Divorce Mrs. Adeyemi, immediately. She returns every naira she's stolen, and we have tracked it all, so she cannot hide it. She resigns from all charity positions and signs a legally binding agreement to never work in the nonprofit sector again. She makes a public statement taking full responsibility for her actions. Aunt Ngozi's eyes were hard, and she leaves this family alone, forever. And if she doesn't agree, Chief Adeyemi asked. Then we pursue full criminal prosecution. The evidence will be handed over to the EFCC and the police. Her face will be on every news channel in Nigeria. She will go to prison, and her name will become synonymous with corruption and child abandonment. All eyes turned to Vivian. She sat there in her Chanel suit, her expensive jewelry, her perfect makeup, and realized that none of it mattered anymore. She was cornered. Completely, utterly cornered. Her voice cracked, I'll agree to the terms. Say it clearly, Aunt Ngozi demanded. I want no ambiguity. Vivian took a shaky breath. I agree to divorce. I'll return the money, all of it. I'll resign from the charity. I'll sign whatever you want me to sign. And you'll leave Amara alone? Yes. You'll make no attempt to contact her, see her, or interfere in her life in any way. Yes. Aunt Ngozi nodded. Then we have an agreement. My lawyer will have the papers drawn up by tomorrow. She stood, and everyone else rose with her. Chief Adeyemi, I'd like to discuss something with you privately, about Amara's future care. She looked at the little girl. Amara, would you show Mrs. Adeyemi out? It was a power move, having the child escort the adult who'd wronged her to the door. Amara stood and walked to the entrance. Vivian followed on shaky legs. At the door, Vivian turned to look at the girl one last time. She started, but no words came. What could she possibly say? Amara looked up at her with those clear, honest eyes. Goodbye, Auntie Vivian, she said simply. Not angry, not bitter, just done. And somehow, that was worse than any accusation could have been. 3 weeks later, Lagos was buzzing with gossip. The news had broken like a thunderstorm across social media and traditional press alike. Mrs. Vivian Adeyemi, the woman everyone had admired, the philanthropist, the style icon, the perfect wife, was a fraud. The headlines were merciless. Lagos Society Queen exposed, millions stolen from orphan charity. From penthouse to disgrace, the fall of Vivian Adeyemi. She left a child on the roadside and stole from orphans. The dark truth about Lagos's favorite philanthropist. Vivian had made her public statement as agreed, standing before cameras with no makeup, wearing simple clothes, her voice shaking as she admitted to embezzlement and grave errors in judgment regarding my stepdaughter. She returned the money, all of it, liquidating offshore accounts, selling properties, handing over jewelry. The charity received every naira back, plus interest. But the damage to her reputation was permanent. Her Instagram, once filled with thousands of admiring comments, was now flooded with angry messages. Former friends blocked her number. Invitations to elite events stopped coming. The society that had once embraced her now shunned her completely. She'd moved into a modest apartment in Surrey, nothing like the Ikoyi mansion she'd called home. She was broke, disgraced, and utterly alone. The divorce had been finalized in record time. Chief Adeyemi's lawyers had been efficient and ruthless. But the story's real shock wasn't Vivian's fall from grace. It was what happened after. In the Adeyemi mansion, things had changed dramatically. Chief Adeyemi had done a lot of soul-searching in the weeks following the revelation. How had he been so blind? How had he allowed someone to hurt his daughter under his own roof? The guilt ate at him. One evening, he sat Amara down in the living room, the same living room where Vivian had once held court, planning charity events and social gatherings. "Sunshine," he said, using his old nickname for her, "I need to apologize to you." "For what, Papa?" "For not seeing, for not protecting you the way I should have." His voice was heavy with regret. "Your mother, your real mother, she made me promise to always take care of you, and I failed." "You didn't fail, Papa. You didn't know." "But I should have known. A father should know when his child is suffering." He took her small hands in his larger ones. "I've been thinking a lot about what's best for you, about who can give you the love and attention you deserve." Amara's heart began to race. Was he sending her away? "Your Aunt Ngozi has made a request," Chief Adeyemi continued. "She wants to be a bigger part of your life. She wants to be your legal guardian." "But you're my papa." "Yes, and I will always be your papa, always. But Sunshine, I'm gone so much for work. Business trips, meetings, long hours at the office. You spend so much time alone in this big house." He smiled sadly. "Ngozi can give you what I can't, constant presence, female guidance, the connection to your mother's family that you deserve." "Would I never see you?" "Never, God forbid. You'd see me all the time. Weekends, holidays, whenever I'm in town. And when you're older, you can choose where you want to live. But for now, while you're still young," he paused, "I think your mother would want her sister to help raise you." Amara thought about Aunt Ngozi, about how safe she'd felt in her apartment, about how the older woman looked at her with such love and pride, about how she told stories about Amara's mother, stories that made her feel connected to the woman she barely remembered. "Okay, Papa," she said quietly. "I think that would be good." Chief Adeyemi pulled her into a tight embrace. "You're so brave, my sunshine, so much braver than your old father." The legal paperwork was filed within a week. Chief Adeyemi transferred a significant portion of his estate into a trust managed by Aunt Ngozi for Amara's benefit. He ensured his daughter would never want for anything: education, healthcare, experiences, opportunities. Everything would be provided for. But more than that, he gave her something money couldn't buy: family. Aunt Ngozi's apartment became Amara's new home. They developed routines together: Saturday morning trips to the market, Sunday afternoon cooking sessions, evening homework help, bedtime stories about Kioma. For the first time since her mother died, Amara felt like she belonged somewhere. Chief Adeyemi visited every Wednesday evening for dinner and spent every weekend with his daughter. Their relationship actually grew stronger once the pressure of daily guardianship was lifted. He could just be her father, fun, loving, present, without the constant guilt of not being enough. Aunt Ngozi enrolled Amara in a better school, one where the teachers noticed and cared about each student individually. She hired a therapist to help Amara process the trauma of what Vivian had done. She made sure the child had friends, activities, and joy. The corn-selling setup was retired. It had served its purpose. Aunt Ngozi revealed that she'd actually made her fortune in real estate and investments, building an empire while living abroad. She'd returned to Nigeria specifically because she'd heard through the family network that her niece was living with a new stepmother, and her protective instincts had been activated. "Your mother was my baby sister," she told Amara one night as they sat on the balcony watching the Lagos skyline light up. "When she died, I was in London, building my business. I wasn't here to help your father through his grief. I wasn't here to watch you grow up. That guilt has lived with me for years." "You're here now," Amara said simply, leaning against her aunt's shoulder. "Yes, and I'm never leaving again." 6 months after the exposure, Amara attended a charity event with Aunt Ngozi, a real charity event, properly managed, with transparent accounting. It was an event for the very organization Vivian had stolen from, Hope for Tomorrow. The charity had been restructured, its board replaced, its finances audited and cleaned up. All the money Vivian had stolen had been returned and was now being used as originally intended, to help orphaned and vulnerable children across Lagos. Amara, now 11 years old, stood on the stage beside Aunt Ngozi. "This young lady," Aunt Ngozi told the crowd, "is the reason we caught the corruption that plagued this organization. Because of her courage in surviving a terrible situation, because of her willingness to tell the truth, hundreds of children will now receive the help they deserve." The crowd applauded. Amara looked out at all those faces, kind faces, interested faces, faces that actually cared about helping children rather than using them as props for social media photos. This was what charity was supposed to look like. After the event, as they drove home, Amara asked, "Aunt Ngozi, do you think Auntie Vivian learned her lesson?" "I don't know, dear. Sometimes people learn, sometimes they don't, but that's not our concern anymore." "Do you think she's sorry?" Aunt Ngozi was quiet for a moment. "I think she's sorry she got caught." "Whether she's truly sorry for what she did," she shrugged, "only God knows what's in her heart." "I feel bad for her sometimes," Amara admitted. "Is that wrong?" "No, my sweet child, that's not wrong. That's called compassion. The fact that you can feel empathy for someone who hurt you shows that you have a beautiful heart." She reached over and squeezed Amara's hand. "Your mother would be so proud of the person you're becoming." As for Vivian, she'd taken a job as a sales clerk in a mid-tier boutique in Aikcha. It was honest work, but such a far cry from her former life that sometimes she'd catch her reflection in the store mirror and not recognize herself. She'd lost everything: her marriage, her money, her status, her friends, her entire identity. But in the quiet moments, late at night in her small apartment, she'd sometimes think about that little girl she'd pushed out of the car. And she'd wonder, what if she'd made different choices? What if she'd chosen to love instead of resent? What if she'd seen Amara as a blessing instead of a burden? What if she'd been the stepmother, a grieving child, deserved instead of the monster she'd become? But what ifs couldn't change the past. The truth was, she'd had a chance to be part of something beautiful, a blended family, a child who needed guidance, a man who would have loved her if she'd let him. And she destroyed it all because of jealousy, greed, and pride. The hardest lesson Vivian learned wasn't about consequences or justice. It was this: sometimes the people you underestimate are the ones who hold the power to destroy your world. And sometimes the child you abandon becomes the reason for your downfall. Karma, it turned out, was very real. And she had a very long memory. Amara Adeyemi, now 16 years old, stood at the podium of her school's auditorium, accepting an award for academic excellence and community service. She'd spent the past 5 years volunteering with Hope for Tomorrow, the very charity her stepmother had stolen from. She'd helped organize donation drives, visited orphanages, mentored younger children who'd lost parents. She'd turned her pain into purpose. Chief Adeyemi sat in the front row, beaming with pride. Beside him sat Aunt Ngozi, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. In her acceptance speech, Amara said something that would stick with everyone in that room. I learned that sometimes the worst things that happen to us become the foundation for the best things we'll ever do. I learned that family isn't always about blood, it's about who shows up when you need them most. And I learned that kindness and truth will always win in the end. The audience rose in a standing ovation. And somewhere across Lagos, in a small apartment, a woman who'd once been powerful heard about the speech on the radio and felt the weight of what she'd lost pressed down on her chest like a stone. Vivian turned off the radio and stared at her hands that had once worn diamonds, now calloused from honest work. She'd thought she wanted perfection, but she'd destroyed the only thing that was truly perfect, a child's trust. And that, she realized too late, was something no amount of money or status could ever replace. If this story touched your heart, subscribe for more powerful stories with someone who needs to hear it. Because Amara's story isn't just about revenge, it's about resilience, truth, and the power of family. Thank you for watching.